Welcome back to the Good Rodeo podcast. I'm your regular host, Garrett Smith, joined by regular co-hosts Simon Kuhn and Dave Cottle. This is historic. Not only is it episode 23, which actually doesn't sound all that historic, but we are for once together, recording together in the same room. This is unprecedented. This is earth-shattering. We also happen to be at the Rodeo headquarters in Bozeman, Montana. And for everybody listening or viewing, if there's loud thunderstorm type noises in the background, it's because there's a loud thunderstorm going on outside in this beautiful late summer Montana afternoon or morning or whatever time it is. I know that we went on a bit of a quest this morning to source some ripets. Turns out they don't sell those here in Montana. Fail.
Someone knows where they are, and hope their audience help us figure it.
Yeah. If you are in Montana and you can source some ripets, or you can introduce us to the ripet leadership so that we can tell you the marketing team so we can finally close a marketing, branding, sponsorship deal, we would be much obliged. Okay, so let's jump right into the show. A couple of big geopolitical items. We're going to do things a little bit different today. We're going to do not quite a lightning round. I called it hot takes before we press record. I don't know what it'll actually end up being, but we're going to try and get through some snappy headlines just with some, gut impulse reactions from the group. At first, it turns out that President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin from Russia are going to be meeting in Alaska. I don't think we are misunderstanding the news story that Trump is intending to trade Alaska for anything. But quick hot takes. What's actually going to happen? Nobody knows, but what's going to happen?
Ukraine's nobody's territory.
Okay.
That's what I think. I just don't see a scenario, and we've seen a lot of different positions from the Trump admin trying to negotiate something that resembles a ceasefire or a peace deal. There's no real progress there. But I think it's very clear that the Russians have no intention of stopping without getting some territory. And I don't know that our current government cares a whole lot about that.
Yeah,
sure. Take a slice.
Yeah,
interesting. I do not see us as an advocate in that room of being Ukrainian integrity must be preserved at all costs.
Do you think there's symbolism in the fact that they're meeting in Alaska? You maybe implied something before we read it.
So here's the first of all, Dave and I both. There's definitely symbolism, and the question is, what is this symbol? Mm-hmm. That is more debatable. I think, Dave, what you were saying, go ahead.
Well, it's closest to the U.S.-Russia border, right? Like it's
convenient.
It's convenient. It's symbolic because it's symbolic because the Russian president is coming to actual U.S. soil, which is significant. There's also, you made a joke about it. Yeah, of course, we're not going to negotiate, put Alaska on the table as part of the deal. But I promise you, at some point during the negotiation, Putin will lean across the table. And people across the table go, Alaska used to be ours.
Yeah. Also, Alaska is a non-contiguous piece of American territory. If there's an argument to be made for, you have Americans here, you are ethnically and, culturally associated with this piece of land, but it doesn't touch your land.
Yeah.
Canada's in the way.
Yeah. It's not the lower 48.
I think there's plenty of cultural symbolism in it.
Wherever this meeting takes place, there's probably a Russian Orthodox church.
Right.
Less than a flock.
You think there's a Russian Orthodox church in Anchorage, Alaska? I actually don't know.
There's definitely one in Wilmington, Montana. So there's for sure one somewhere.
Almost guaranteed. We bought Alaska from Russia, 2 cents an acre or something. I'd like to get that deal now. There was a full-fledged colony there. There were Russian people on. So I assume, I don't know this for a fact. I assume the Russian people consider it once part of the Russian Empire, right?
Yeah, I would be shocked.
I think we read this argument.
I'd be shocked to go that far because basically the entire eastern third of Russia is considered the wilderness by them. People don't live there, not en masse. Now that being said, Kelly is the governor of Siberia. He's the most terrifying wrestler that ever existed in the history of wrestling. Are you familiar with this now?
No idea what you're talking.
Olympic gold medalist, famous for just being a monster, retires and becomes the governor of Siberia. Yeah, he's like Jesse Ventura, a terrifying monster. He's like Russia's Jesse Ventura, but way scary.
So are you predicting that there's actual meaningful outcomes to this meeting?
I don't know if it's here.
Go back and say we've got a deal.
So this is the thing, right?
I would be shocked. I don't think it does happen.
And here's the other thing, though. I think we're all going to be shocked when it does happen because there's no more additional facts that are going to come to light here. Eventually, the dam is going to break, and it's going to be at the most random. Like, oh, we all assumed it was just another touch gloves, but at some point they're going to go, all right, let's call it. What could materially change on the ground after our investment? The amount of people that died. We know where the lines are. We know that Russia is sort of slowly moving forward, and the bulwark is dependent on resources flowing into Ukraine. And at some point, you're just going to go, that's enough.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I don't see like I don't see like a Hiroshima or Nagasaki flashpoint that allows them to go like, all right, cut up.
My hot take, and we'll pivot here. My hot take is I kind of wish that they'd done this without Denmark's approval in Greenland. But I think that would have been best. For the panel, I lost one was up.
Okay, good now. That's with the Chinese present.
Yeah, the Chinese could have brokered it, yes. Second item, apparently the U.S. government has struck a deal with the chip maker NVIDIA to have something like a revenue share from exports of advanced chips to China. It apparently was the result of a direct, like, mano-a-mano negotiation between President Trump and Jensen Huang. That's a shocking and amazing thing. I'm sure there's precedent for things like this, but I mean, the sequence of events is, the administration said they were going to reduce the regulatory hurdle and grant export licenses to NVIDIA to export their chips. It didn't happen immediately. Jensen Huang goes to the White House. There's a verbal exchange where there's like I want 20%, says Trump. How about 15? Would you take 15, says Huang? And 2 days later, the export licenses are granted. I mean, that's like it's not shocking, I suppose, at some level, because this is how Trump is operating generally, but it's still shocking.
That
is a thing.
Two major, what the fuck are we doing here? First of all, what's the goal? What are we hoping to get at? Because if it's just a slice of money, we're willing to trade China having a massive advantage, which we know they have in this purchasing space, for a small slice of money. That's a bad deal on the geopolitical leverage space. I'm not saying it's bad for us to take a cut of money from companies that want to continue to business in China. I understand some level of that philosophically, but our get there is way on the negative in that China is getting a much larger proportion of chips and running really. So that's my first question. My second one, though, is what are we doing with this money specifically? Because
I think it's about money. Keep going.
I also don't think it's about the money. So it makes me wonder what's the get. What is the overarching? My fear is the overarching is just to prove that we can cut a deal and get some.
I think that's part of it. I've heard Walter Russell Mead, an academic and journalist who I've listened to and respect, and Reed made the argument that Trump and his style in almost everything is to create lots of uncertainty and the perception of mixed motivations, and it makes it hard to predict and whatever. I don't know if any of that's true. It was a compelling argument. The second is that if you believe the administration, they want the world to optimize, to include China. They want the world to optimize on the American tech stack. And so this is a way to ensure that China is building on American technology and our tech stack.
Right.
And so in the end, I don't think it's about the money. I think the money piece is either the Walter Russell Mead create a little bit of uncertainty with mixed motivations and weirdness, or it's, just Trump proving that he's a negotiator and he can get what he wants.
I think logically you're right. It can't be about them. It's just not enough money to really to be worth any balance of power into it. You're pulling something else, and I don't see the direct offer.
Or it's setting precedent for future revenues and controls from the United States government granting export licenses to other critical.
Sure.
And I hadn't thought about that. That's a really interesting take. Make the world reliant on a critical technology that the United States provides and controls.
Yeah,
we touched on it. That's a more.
Dave was out. We did talk about this a couple of weeks ago with
Space
McCarthy or with Gary Ash.
So we touched on this a little bit in the space that we talked about how SpaceX disrupted, space launch, obviously. And previously you had ULA, and one of the big complaints from Senator John McCain was that ULA had a bunch of Russian engineers who developed those rockets, using Russian rockets. But the part that never seemed to float the conversation was, what do those Russian engineers build if they're not building American rockets?
That's right.
And and this is the same thing, like it's just, Operation Paperclip and all these different things. Like they have talent and they do stuff. We can either have a hand on the steering wheel of what kind of stuff they're doing, or we can leave them to their own devices.
Yeah,
And it's a very interesting sort of flank.
To continue riffing on this, and we'll pivot into the deal book piece of the show. But I've heard the argument, and I find it compelling that granting export licenses for a decimated last gen, but still very advanced set of chip exports to China for NVIDIA is good enough that China will now be deterred from developing their own organic homegrown capabilities. So we kind of like, again, putting them on the American tech stack and deterring a competitive technology, like
Reverse snuffing of innovation. But all like a little bit easier. So
that's right. That's exactly right. But at the same time, it's not the most advanced stuff. So we are still ahead. This is the art. Okay. Deal book stuff. The first one, I know for sure someone's going to like this. A company, I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm going to call it DISA. D-I-S-A, DISA. I don't know. It's a Wyoming company, just closed a Series A2 round of, it looks like $30 million, led by Evoke, Constellation, and participation from Valor Equity and Halliburton. Halliburton's, I think they're CVC. I don't really know. This is a company that's building technology, dual-use technology, obvious national security implications, but it's uranium and mineral recovery technology, which I think is pretty interesting in an era where mineral and critical mineral, rare earth kind of supply chain stuff is now a national security imperative in a way that it hasn't been for a while.
So, I mean, I have a ton of questions right up to rip. I know just enough about uranium that we already have a ton of it.
Yeah.
So does Australia, I think.
It's not just uranium. That's like a big call out from, again, this piece that I read. Sure. It's also just about general mineral recovery. I think it is a technology that potentially can be applied elsewhere outside of the uranium context. Anyway,
this is like the classic conundrum of recycling in general, right? There's a ton of rare earth metals, critical minerals, heavy metals that are used all over the place in disposable goods or in the byproduct of industrial processes that we just kind of leave. There's mountains of slag all over America full of good iron that we're just like, that's not useful. Like we needed coal, put the slag pod, call it a day. But I don't know of anywhere where recovery is more economic than just ripping it out of the ground.
Right.
And ripping it out of the ground is very dirty.
Yes.
I don't care what anyone tells you. There's no way to do mining that doesn't destroy the mountain in town. And it's a factor of life. You can argue it one way or the other, but like the mountain's coming down.
And part of the dirty is the slag heat. It's the water, the sea.
Sadly, there's no clean version of. There's a million ways to mine, and none of them end with like, I got a bunch of clean stuff afterwards. I'm real happy with what I've done to my full conscience.
So without knowing much about this company, DISA, again, sorry if it's pronounced some other way, maybe, name your company something that's easier to pronounce. But maybe part of this is, let's clean it up. Let's get more out of the extraction process. And if you can do it economically, apparently this group of,
I love the idea. And there's tons of there's another like reclamation process that I always thought was really interesting that never took off, which is pulling germanium out of coal ash. Then there's coal ash all over.
Okay.
And germanium is a rare earth element that China owns 90% of the supply chain.
Yeah.
Just the ability to create domestic sources and stuff through recovery is super interesting to me. I have yet to see one that was like, and the economics are awesome.
Yeah.
In my mind, they're good enough to be worth it to make us not reliant on these like.
I was going to say, at some level, it might not matter whether the true blue commercial economics makes sense if it's a national security imperative.
This is profitable, right? They're a VC-backed business. The economics have to be good for that.
No, but that's not true, because part of the reason, and this might allow us to segue to the next topic, and I want to hear, Dave, do you have any thoughts on this company? But defense tech pure relies on government activities in reducing red tape or enabling small business innovation or whatever, right? So at some level, the venture industry does respond to regulation of the regulatory environment in the same way they do to any other element of a business strategy.
So this is a different regulatory regime from the one most play in.
Of course, sure.
That's where things get super risky here, because it's just like when we were doing immigration issues for Afghan allies. A lot of veterans who felt strongly about people that they served with and wanted to bring over realized that there was a raging immigration debate for the last 100 years. Like, you're the back of the line.
Yeah.
You just waded into like the deepest end of the pool, and no one here actually cares about what we did to you.
Sure.
And so like, this is the same problem with mining. It's like, all right, now you're going to go find out what the Sierra Club does full time. And there's like booze and everybody's not there backing you up. It's just your VCs a little like, it's just a much stickier place. And in my experience, all of my interaction with resource companies, and I've had a bunch here in Montana, and they basically say, hey, the economics of what I do are not broad enough for me to like, I bet I can dig out some rare earths while I do it. They're like, not going to do it. If the government shows up, gives me $100 million to build that processing plant, then I'm in.
But that's what Garrett's saying. He's assuming in the market sizing that happened here, the VCs are like folks that made this investment are assuming some government subsidy. They're assuming some forthcoming policy that's going to require those people that are tracking those sources to do business differently, and they become the customer of this outfit. It's, I think that they probably calculated all that into this.
The bad news is I haven't seen it yet. I've been watching the issue for a good number of years. Regulatory, there's movement under the current administration. Funding wise, there's just not a huge influx of government cash coming the way you see with like DIU and innovation to just put billions into revitalizing the American mining industry, revitalizing the American mineral process. Because most of the time it's a process problem. Like, you look at all the oil that comes out of Canada, it gets processed here. They have no processing facilities.
Yeah.
It's a great topic. I think it's awesome work. But
For sure, tomorrow, this company, they might totally suck.
They might be also anyone reclaiming minerals and like making good uses. I mean, think about all the electronics waste, all the stuff that we have. It's full of things that we worked really hard to pull out of the earth.
Yeah.
There's stuff there.
Yeah. So
Q and buy. Yeah, I'm sure there's really smart people.
So on the topic of red tape, I'm going to pivot to the second deal book item or story. TechCrunch ran a piece called "For Defense Tech Startups, Red Tape is a Burden and Also a Moat." So I have thoughts on this, just having been in the startup trenches for 6-7 years, running Reveal. You guys have seen it because you've been here for quite a while. We often spend the majority of our time in the regulatory conversation thinking, gosh, it's so hard to do business. Why isn't it easier? But also, when we're on the other side of a production contract, and we're actually like, generating revenue, which we are this year and going forward, I'm actually going to be quite grateful for like this protective layer, this barrier into entry for others. Oftentimes, when we're talking with investors or the market, they'll say, well, Reveal's, product X has a obviously viable competitive technology. Why out here in the commercial space? I say to them, that just says to me, you don't know anything about what it takes to sell to government, because it's now taken us 3 to 5 years to really crack the code on how to get in on long-term programmatic spending in various programs. And from a cold start, some brand new technology or even some legacy technology that's been operating out in the commercial or consumer space for a long time, they've got no chance to get there any faster than anybody else. And so I like the notion of there being a moat or a barrier in place, but that doesn't mean it's easy, right?
I think a lot of the acquisition reforms we talk about are moat eliminated in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Which is going to make things challenging for folks like us who are not exactly Johnny-come-lately. So there's a lot of us that had to figure out the hardest way of getting an authority to operate on a DoD network. And then you wake up one day like, we're going to fix that for everybody. It's like, oh, that's
just made it across that area.
Yeah, I did. It's costing a lot of money.
I don't think.
Dave, is this a triggering conversation for you? Are you feeling escalated?
I'm with you that like finding and baking it across the moat, and then proceeding with the confidence that everybody else is still you get sort of pull the ladder up behind you. That's giving me some confidence, and that it's unfortunate timing that just landing on the other side of the boat, and now we're gonna make it easier to cross for everybody else. Is mildly concerning, but I mean, I still want it to happen. It's still progress. It's still positive. It's as a progress. And I also think that even in its most extreme version, there's still a lot out there, right? I mean, even in its most extreme version, your capabilities have to be vetted and credentialed. And like, we're never just going to completely skip the process of validating these things to go out.
I think the cultural moat is the bigger bulwark for folks like us than the bureaucratic moat. because you could eliminate a lot of these slow processes. You can reform them, you create new front doors, but you really can't recreate. Do you know what the infantry's problem is?
Yeah.
How many people do you know in the 82nd Airborne, what problems they have on a day-to-day that you're solving for? That's the hardest thing. You could build a great piece of tech. No, you don't know about in the Army. You never talk to anyone in the Army. It's a different language. It's a different world.
And the combo for success that we've learned now over nearly 7 years of business has been that building a great product that solves a known problem for which you have empathy and for which you've developed a great solution is only, part of the winning recipe, and it might not even be the majority. Then there's all the compliance and authorities and budgeting and
like those time, right? Predict you might not be the priority of the Army this week, but you might be next month. You need to be there before that happens.
And this notion of moat, sorry, I'll hand it off to you. This notion of moat is why there was so much consolidation behavior post, in the peace dividend post Cold War period. And you've had these legacy players who've been around for, in some cases, hundreds of years, right? It's because they have participated in the moat building, and they were on the other side of the moat when the moats were being, constructed. Azure, they are the beneficiaries of that. And what it meant, and this is why I'm with you, Dave, that I'm glad for the red tape regulatory kind of or deregulation motion here, because it's going to inspire continued innovation in a way we haven't seen. Because those legacy players, they were on the right side of the moat. They participated in reinforcing the moat. Because of all of that, there was limited incentive to innovate and to truly building great technology. And instead, they were able to rest on their laurels because of the moat. So we want to be able to rest sometimes on our laurels, but we want to participate in an industry where we are pushing the envelope and building the next generation of great technology.
Yeah, so I've probably said it too many times in this forum for it to be helpful anymore, but I feel so passionately about it. Everybody that approaches one of the three of us, it's, startup founder type, or once again, defense tech or dual use thing, and they always, hey, we saw this article about Reveal, or things seem to be going well. Simon, Dave, what's the advice you can give it? I say the same thing every time, because there was we got TRL behind, the greatest product ever. Forget the TRL for a second. Okay, great technology is table stakes in this game. Integration readiness. How well does it work with all of the other things that they have? How well does it work with their mission and their metal and their kick? Where has it been credentialed? Where has it been certified? Where is it authorized to use on? Again, it's a silly example to talk about tires for Humvees or for tactical vehicles. But if you have a cheaper tire that's run flat and is objectively better at every cost and half the cost, 50% of the cost, if you have the better tire, the program manager that buys tires still can't buy it.
Right.
Unless you clear the wheel well, and we have, running 1 million miles on the different types of vehicles that it's going to be on. It found all of the problems and how well it works with that specific engine type and how well it works with that.
I think drones are headway resistance very fast
because they'll commoditize, and
we're innovating so fast. There's a newer, better, cheaper, smaller, lighter, faster grown all the time.
Yeah.
But the question is, does the Army know how to use it? Does the Army have TTPs for fighting this way yet?
Not just use it, but can they have a fast enough JSIDs or requirements regime to allow them to rapidly onboard the latest, greatest at the speed of relevance for the current content?
I think it would be very interesting to see where new drone infants are 5 years.
This is so. We always talk about autonomous systems in the context of acquiring material solutions. I honestly believe that's the wrong way to think about it. When you're modernizing a force to fight the next conflict, material, like buying or building new material solutions, is one component. The component that we are missing here in the UAS game is the design, operation, weaponry, maintenance, repair of these things should be a soldier level 10 task. We should be intentionally training the entire military leadership about data and autonomy and the weaponry of these capabilities. We should be teaching soldiers to design, build, operate, and maintain these things with the same level of familiarity as they have with their AR-15.
So I know that we have an agenda and flow that I've got right here in front of me. But because you're talking about that soldier, task element, I think one of your topics, Dave, was about the training regime and the upgrading of the human element in the force in this next generation. I think you had an interest in talking about digital literacy and a range of other stuff. Do you want to take the mic up?
Yeah, so the two topics are really closely related. I feel passionately that we do not need to solve, like as an industry, the Pentagon, we do not need to solve the problem of implementing AI and data and autonomous systems as the DoD or as the industry. I feel passionately that what we have to do is we have to train all of our senior military leaders and all of our next generation up and coming soldiers about all of these capabilities and their limitations and how all of them work. And they all need to become, like, our entire military apparatus has to become very smart on all of these capabilities. And then the problem will solve itself. Then it's not a major acquisition problem.
So I remember there was this movement to turn soldiers, Marines, whatever, special operators into coders, like teaching some of that of like programming literacy. I have lights about that whole concept, and I think it's been passe. That's not what you're describing.
No, what I'm describing is the weapon of the future for the senior leader is AI-driven decision making. The weapon of the future for the 25-year-old paratrooper is one-way attack UAS systems. Those are just now our weapons, and we have to be familiar with them to the same extent we are with our traditional rifles and artillery.
Yeah.
And that when you're modernizing the force, the material component, the acquisition, supply chain, all of that is only one of the 7 factors or characteristics. And I think we're really missing the training and a little bit the organization.
So that sounds like what you were referencing earlier, excited about. This is a cultural.
And I'll play devil's advocate back against that, right? The comparison that you're making to rifles and artillery are acquired in that traditional.
Like, you're not going to start talking about the M16 again. So
I could go down that route if I really need to. But if we're going to say, like, hey, you need to be as familiar with small one-way attack drone systems that you are with your M16, but the M16 is procured in that traditional method, then why shouldn't drones be procured the same way? And I think about this a little bit with as we're pushing down resources and risk to those commanders in acquisition of what they buy, right? I bet we're talking about that. That's becoming more realistic. You're going to have trends in one regiment with a different one-way attack platform than troops in a different regiment. How do you build that same level of like baseline Army familiarity when you have a different system depending on what unit you're in?
So you all were both Marine Officers. We're still Marine. You all were both Marines. You got demolitions trained, right?
Nope.
He did.
Okay. This is exactly the point I'm driving towards. Recon guys can do demolition stuff. Regular Marines can't.
Okay, well, I'll talk to the special Marine. So you go to a lot of special guys in the Army. You have a different special. To be clear, I spent most of my career as an officer. Officers not.
Yeah.
They're not placed in the door chart. Go ahead. But you went to demo training, and then when you went out to go conduct operations, you didn't bring the industry, the DoD procured this type of block breach and solution, or the if you need to put a hole in a wall, this is the exact kit that we procured for you to do that. You bring a couple blocks in C4 and some depth board. That's and then you make the solution that you need for the circumstances that you're facing. For the I'm not talking about the entire stack of autonomous systems in the United States military, but for the small tactical stuff, that is how we should be thinking about it. Like, give them the basic tools, knowledge, and understanding how this stuff works. Don't make them coders. Just make them very smart on these capabilities. Make it part of their part of the basic training of how to build these things, design them, weaponeer them, and you give them watch see. You give them the components.
Yeah. So not to draw too deeply on this analogy, but I didn't go to methods of entry course, MOE or breacher course in the Marine Corps. That's where the very serious demolitions experts end up going, at least the entry level. But I went through an improvised demolitions component within the Marine Corps Infantry Officer course and did some other things elsewhere, more like MJT. But yeah, I think the principle here is exactly what you're describing. We took like the tools, the basic elements of C4, det cord. We used at one point we were using like wine bottles so that you can develop a hasty shape chart. We talked about like the math behind how to understand what breach charge is required for, obstacle A or B or C.
It sounds like maybe a better comparison in the M16 is more comms or combat life safety, right? everyone needs to have some basic level, like, hey, you need to get on the radio and talk to somebody. Yes. Everyone needs to be able to do that.
Hey, LT, that is your weapon. You should be like, that is your weapon. You need to become extremely competent with how it works, how to fix it. You know, what happens if, what are you going to do if it's jammed? Here's your alternate channels. You need to be able to do it with your eyes closed. That is my approach. So you're saying senior leaders in data and for tactical soldiers and autonomous systems, that is the level of proficiency that we have to build and enforce. It's not just, okay, we'll fix scale and we'll manufacture it for UAS system and every soldier can now have a drone tomorrow. That's not, because then that UAS system,
Where does this, is this somewhere in trade?
at every single echelon trade off with the entire,
Where do you start though? What's the starting point? Where do you start?
oh man, like buying the senior leaders, right? You're buying the senior, like that.
No, that's too abstract. Like what's the actual starting point? Like what's the one thing that I would coddle or made king for, emperor king for the day?
I would do it at entry training. I would do it for new lieutenants. I would do it at basic training. I would do it at our schoolhouses. Then focus on training.
To his point, right? I mean, in basic, I got comms familiarity, but then I got to my battalion, I got to my company, and there was a comms section.
Yes.
Who was extra efficient, and like once a quarter or whatever, comms guys would come around. I had to go to the class to show everyone that I actually kind of suck at this.
Yeah.
But I get refreshed.
Yeah.
The same thing with like I had a corpsman, a combat lifesaver, like a refresh everything because you need to be proficient. So it needs to be touched everywhere.
Yeah.
Like so.
And so there's a whole other component to force modernization that we're not talking about here. That's not material acquisition, and it's not training. It's doctrine. So the first thing you do is you write down, this is what the schoolhouse is going to do. This is what the non-commissioned officer schoolhouse is going to do. This is what the people training lieutenants are going to do. This is what Force Down is going to do to solve this problem. A piece of doctrine that drops this. Like, we'll grab the 22-year-olds that are fresh into the force.
The first kinetic drone strike on Camp Lejeune was done by the infantry training schoolhouse. Because like right now, it really is the Wild West of like, okay, well, the Marines there know what's happening. It's going to have to touch every echelon soon. Schoolhouses are a part of it.
Across the entire force. Every single 25-year-old paratrooper, Marine, what have you, has gone, give me a drone, give me a drone, give me a drone, give me a drone, give me a drone. I didn't do stuff. It's not coming. Okay, go into my garage. Across the entire formation, that is what's happening here.
Which is probably good in some ways, right? Because if we gave them drones, that would probably stifle the instinct to be like, I got to go figure this out for myself. Similar to our point with giving Chinese chips. If you give them nothing, they're going to come up with solutions and get smarter but faster.
That's true.
So
you'll understand where the true pain points are.
And I'm not sure this is the best
Whole thing first.
but a silver lining, right? It's forcing a lot of people to think about it because there's no institutional solution coming down fast enough.
I know when you get off this topic, and you guys look,
That's
modernization. Well, it's not venture investment. That's nothing. Stop with your forced modernization during outfit. Doctor organization trick. So it's when you write the doctor, when you get it in the schoolhouse, we need to make it a soldier level 10 task. We also probably need to restructure and reorganize this. What happened? You used the example of radios. What happened when radios got small to where they could be proliferated to like hyper tactical?
I don't know, Dave.
Why don't you tell me what happened?
I don't know, because they didn't do that for the
That were only the backpack. Well, at least during my time, like it was a whole backpack. It was steps right.
Well, in the Army, we trained MOS and we sent them with the radio people to radio school.
Yeah, we have that too in the Marines.
So specialty, maybe that's the first thing that I would suggest. A specialty. There is a new job.
There's a drone school. Asked them. That's actually where I was thinking. It was like there needs to be a drone. You go through that schoolhouse.
But we're not just talking about drones. It's how all of it works together. Yeah, it's more fundamental. There's a techno-management school. And there's a techno-management MOS.
Where I hate that.
You don't like that word. I'm with you. I love that.
But there's a techno-manager MOS in every tactical formation in ADSing.
Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left before we got to wrap the show. Simon, pick your poison. You have two topics. You want to talk NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, or do you want to talk about cyber reoptimization?
I'm going to do you one better, and I'm going to ignore your advice. The same topic. NDAA, the bill that authorizes everything in the defense space, to include cybers, is about to happen next month. The cyber thing is interesting, and for folks that care about cyber, you already know to some extent, it is both funded by the Small Business Administration and it is funded by the DoD lab that's participating.
Yeah.
So technically,
and for services. I thought services. Yeah, you services how you
the pot, and then there's an SBA pot that contributes less. But the bill that authorizes the cyber program and controls all the policy doesn't live under the Armed Services Committees. It lives under the Small Business Administration Committees that exist in the House and the Senate. So there is a bill in each House and Senate to reauthorize the SBIR program and make some pretty sweeping changes called the Innovate Act in both sides. Bills are not identical.
I think the content, we might have covered some of this in a previous episode. I think Senator Ernst was putting together the draft version for the Senate.
And I'm not sure who has it in the House. But the thing that matters for like what's about to happen in the world is the only way the Innovate Act and the reauthorization of the SBIR program happens timely enough for this to become law is if it gets attached to the National Defense Authorization.
Right, got it.
Along with the Coast Guard reauthorization, the entire intelligence community. If they do a crypto bill, it'll have to get attached. There's a couple of different bills. These tend to happen at the end of every year.
They did a crypto bill.
I thought this happened. It did. It did
got it.
now. So
or did a version pass in the House and not yet in the Senate?
I think that's probably what happened. I don't watch crypto super closely, but this, generally speaking, the House will pass 500 or 600 bills a year.
Yeah.
And the Senate will do like 30.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of stuff that passes the House and like, okay, it's not going to get time. They're doing nominations. The House doesn't have to do nominations. They have hundreds and hundreds to get through. Right. So in order for a lot of this stuff to become law on time, they're going to jam it all together on the defense bill, because the defense bill has to pass every year, or the DoD shuts down. This is going to be a big debate in Congress. I think the SBIR folks in particular, for folks like us, there's significant reforms to this. There's a provision that a friend of ours, Eric Blott, talks about, which is there's a clawback provision in the SBIR reauthorization that if you're selling software licenses that were developed with SBIR funds to allies that aren't in NATO, you can get your money clawed back, which is real crazy when you start thinking about people like the Swiss and like European allies that may not be in NATO, but are certainly thinking about their borders to the east and what they need to do to modernize their military.
It's what money clawback? So the revenue generated in that sale, or the SBIR money that went into the contracting?
Great question.
So to like pull on a thread of complexity there, what it's a clawback act, and it's SBIR money.
Yeah.
What happens to data rights? Like who owes the IP if the government has clawed back the money? So my assumption about the development.
My assumption is that the government can claw back any money that they've given you, right? Because in order for it to be a clawback, that's money that they gave.
I just wonder if that consideration in a contract, in other words, the money applied in the contract from the government, is the mechanism.
But we're not in those weeds. And this is the thing that people do a lot, and they look at draft legislation is like, oh, well, let's talk about the contractual weeds. We're not there yet, because the law has to pass, and then regulations have to be made about how we implement the law. So no one knows the answer, because you don't write that part of it until after it's live.
It's extremely problematic. I'm going to say, like, on its face, this is extremely problem.
So like, for example, and I could say this for sure, I'm confident enough in how this would shake out in the real world that, like, if the Swiss bought a bunch of your stuff, the government can't take the money that the Swiss gave you. But what they're going to do is look at that $3 million or $6 million they gave you 4 or 5 years ago to develop that product and demand that.
But that's RDT&E. It's research and development, test and evaluation money.
Yeah.
That is the mechanism by which the government, through the contract, secures government ownership, at least in parts, or rights to the IP or the resulting work product or whatever. So my question for Eric and others who are thinking about this would be, what happens to SBIR data rights? What happens to the IP? That actually, in the end, is more important to a company in many contexts than is the minor revenue from the Swiss.
I'm going to talk out of my ass a little bit because I haven't reviewed the text.
You have to do that.
Already? I usually operate on a very stable ground of facts only.
Right.
No opinions. But the text probably doesn't talk about that at all. The text probably talks only about if you're taking money from non-allies, money would be clawed back. And that's it. And the laws are written to be intentionally vague so that the executive branch can get into the weeds of what's appropriate here. Which means, and if it is that way, I'm willing, I'd bet money that it is. That means the executive branch can go, okay, it's completely unrelated to rights. It's just so I can have a punitive lever for certain countries I don't like and I don't do business with them. Or they could take it the other way and be like, actually, I'm mad at you guys. It's data rights. Anything I own, I can pull your money back. You give that flexibility to the executive. You want them to have like the hand on the tiller. Sure. But it's very hard to tell from now. And that makes people nervous. So you'll see some comments in the news about like, well, you should change this part of the reauthorization, because they're thinking about the second and third order effects of, well, wouldn't the executive wanted to use it this way?
Right.
We could.
Right.
So technologies that came from the SBIR program, they're logically derived from the SBIR. Not obviously financial.
The reason those technologies would be sold to the Swiss to begin with is because of the transition rates from SBIR program. Sure. So every time we bring up SBIR, I say again, loudly and clearly, I love the SBIR program. It's the only thing on the planet where the customer will pay you to develop the thing and then buy it from you. However, fewer rewards, larger rewards, more transition costs.
So that's written into, first of all, that's written in the bill. That is the intent of the Innovate.
A lot of the intent of the Innovate Act also is to target so-called cyber mills.
Yes. Less awards, bigger awards, more transition stuff. I have built a straw man around Switzerland, but like the intent of the clawback is don't let the government give you SIPR money and then sell your licenses to China. We're going to come take your money. Yeah. That's the real intent for sure. Yeah. There is a theoretical intent, and we should all have a healthy skepticism of our government that like they will use it the right and good way every time. We should hold their feet to the fire to make sure that like there isn't a mechanism for them to punish me for dealing with a neutral third party that nobody cares about.
Okay, moving toward end of show. Dave, last word, cyber stuff. You want to hit anything else? Cyber? I'll be real quick. I don't know if it's in there. What I would really like to see is some teeth behind some policy with Putin that says that the problem with the SBIR program and transition isn't just a function of funding and timelines and all of that. It's also a problem because if you are competing for a thing and the technology that you're bringing to the table resulted or derived from the SBIR program, you have preference over the established defense prime on the other side of the moat, right? So I'd like to see, I would like to see some teeth put to that. That would solve a lot of problems with the SBIR program. If every program manager and contracting officer in the Department of Defense took it very seriously, that no, this is a resulting SBIR capability. So between these two very similar capabilities, one from a large established prime and one from an SBIR awardee, we choose the SBIR awardee.
What if the other one's better?
The other one's better, then take the other. It's whichever one meets the requirement.
Okay.
Not just has the established contract.
Cool.
I'm wearing footwear from the company Moats, which is a Bozeman company. They're great shoes. These are actually called the Bozeman shoes.
Mine are from Adidas.
So I'm gonna get to yours. Because I always have comments for it. I always have some chirps for Simon. Dave, you're rocking ostrich boots. Those are ostrich. Yeah, I've tried basically every version of animal hide and ostrich for some reason is just like a baseball glove. Yeah, they're the most comfortable. Yeah, I've never worn ostrich boots, but I'm tempted. I need to get comfortable with them. So try it. You're telling me you don't like the boots. You don't like the look of them. Your boots are that. That's what I'm saying. I'm actually saying I like them so much that maybe I can get over my little inhibition around ostrich. You know, the little dots all over the ostrich. But yeah, I tried to. Try it. You'll never get forest follicles. Try those
Quilts? I guess quilt has come out of it. So
quilts.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Sure, they're called quilts. I think that's what they're called. It's called first quill. We're writing it.
So it's called full quill ostrich, and then there's smooth ostrich.
That's ostrich that doesn't have the dots, because maybe I mean it is a quill.
They're just less pronounced. There's like some dots. There's a smooth ostrich.
Why Adidas and not other things that they like Vans, or like why not Puma? Is there a reason for that? This is punk stuff.
Emphatically, they look better. Vans are like a West Coast skate punk shoe. Obviously, they're like a very national thing, but I'm not from the West Coast. I didn't know that.
Sure. The West Coast is still America. But, I mean, like you could be American.
That's not. Well, it depends on which politicians. There's no which news channel you're watching as to where the West Coast falls in the American debate.
Sure.
I wear these and I wear Chuck Taylors, and that's it.
Chuck T's I can get, but we're in Chuck T's. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just 90% of my time all I feed it's either these or the Bears Holland. That's it. Yeah. Full quill Adidas over there. I like that. Thanks for wearing this today, Simon. All right. It's been a rousing conversation, gentlemen, and I'm grateful that for once we're all together here at the Reveal headquarters, and looking forward to next time. It'll be virtual, most likely. Sorry, but looking forward to it. Give us a follow in the socials and on podcasts and video platforms of choice. Refer us to your friends, send us notes. We're all about making this thing what you want it to be. And from Bozeman, adios.